My own parents filed an eviction notice on my house. Their names were on the paperwork as owners. Mine was listed as tenant. And the sheriff who delivered it was standing on my welcome mat at 6 in the morning. Clipboard angled like this was routine, asking me to sign a form confirming I understood I had 7 days to leave. According to the filing, I owed back rent. According to the filing, my parents had been my landlords for 6 years. According to the filing, I had signed a lease agreeing to all of it. Which would be interesting, because 6 years ago, my grandmother left this house to exactly one person. She left it to me. The deed was in my fireproof safe downstairs, one name on it, one owner, and it had never been anyone else. But my parents didn't just file paperwork, they faked my signature to do it, and they made one mistake in that document, one small detail they didn't bother to check. The kind of mistake you only make when you don't actually see your own child. When someone puts your forged name on a court document, the courthouse doesn't just throw it out. It gets sent somewhere else. Somewhere my parents never expected their names to end up. The deputy's taillights hadn't cleared my driveway before I was in my office pulling the fireproof safe out from under the desk. My hands were steady, but my chest was pounding. Not fear, something colder than fear. The deed was right where I'd kept it since my grandmother's estate was settled, recorded with the county. One name, Claire Ann Danes. No co-owners, no liens, no transfers. My grandmother paid off the mortgage in 2012 and left me the house in her will when she passed in 2020. I set the deed on the table and opened the eviction papers. My parents had attached a 2-page lease agreement, $800 a month starting January 2020, both their names listed as landlords, and my signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't my signature. The handwriting was close enough that someone unfamiliar with my hand might accept it, but I know how I sign my name. My signature is small, tight, and fast. This one was wide and careful, with loops that were too round and a slant that leaned the wrong direction, like someone had studied it from a distance and picked their best attempt. And then I saw the mistake. The name above the signature line read, Claire Ann Danes, A-N-N-E. My middle name is Ann, 3 letters, no E. It has never had an E. Not on my birth certificate, not on my driver's license, not on a single document I have ever signed in my life. My own parents copied my name and couldn't even spell it right. That one wrong letter told me everything about how carefully they've been paying attention for the last 34 years. It also told me how this would end. People that careless don't suddenly get careful when it matters. I pulled up the county registry on my laptop and typed in the property address. Owner, Claire Ann Danes. No transfer history, no secondary claims, no pending filings. My parents had never tried to move the deed legally because they knew it wouldn't hold up. So they skipped the law entirely and went straight to fabrication. They manufactured a lease, faked my signature, misspelled my name, and filed it with a court of law. They were betting I would be too shocked or too loyal to look closely. They were betting I'd fold. They forgot what I do for a living. I prepare cases for attorneys 5 days a week. I review filings. I catch inconsistencies in documents for a paycheck. And now, every skill I use at my desk was about to be pointed directly at them. By 9 that morning, I was on the phone with the county clerk's office. I gave the woman my property address and asked if any transfer of ownership had ever been filed. She typed it in, paused, and confirmed what the registry already showed. One owner on record, no transfers, no pending claims. Then I asked a second question. I asked if anyone had recently requested copies of the property records. She went quiet for a moment. She said she couldn't give me a name, but she could tell me that a records request had been made approximately 4 months ago. 4 months. Which meant my mother had been preparing for this since the fall. She pulled the records, saw the deed was in my name, and instead of accepting it, spent 4 months building a case out of nothing. The fake lease, the copied signature, the court filing. And the whole time, she was sitting across from me at Thanksgiving dinner, smiling, passing the rolls, asking about my week. That wasn't impulse. That was strategy. And if they won that hearing, I could be out of my house in days, even if I was right. Courts move on paperwork, not truth, and right now they had paperwork with my name on it. I called my cousin Beth before lunch. Beth and I had always been close, and she was the one person in my family who never chose sides. I didn't explain the eviction yet. I just asked her one question. Had my mother ever said anything about the house? Beth didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful, like she was choosing each word. She said yes, For years, my mother had been telling the family that I lived in her house rent-free, that she and my father had bought the property and let me stay out of kindness, that I never offered to pay a dime and never once said thank you. Then Beth said something that made my stomach drop. She said my mother had told people she had paperwork proving the arrangement, that she had a signed lease but was too kind to enforce it. 6 years of that story. Every holiday, every phone call, every family gathering. My mother hadn't just been lying about the house. She'd been pre-selling the forgery. She told everyone the lease existed long before she actually created it, so that when she finally filed it, the whole family would say, "Of course it's real. We've known about it for years." Beth said she'd believed it until this very phone call. She said most of the family still did. My mother never raised her voice about any of it. She would just shake her head with this tired, sad expression and say, "Claire takes everything for granted. Quiet disappointment. Performed perfectly, over and over." She wasn't a mother worn down by her child. She was building an audience for the day she'd need one. And now I understood the full picture. The eviction wasn't the beginning. It was the final act. She had spent years writing the script so that when she made her move, every person around her would nod and say she had every right. But she hadn't planned for Beth to call me. And she definitely hadn't planned for her daughter, the paralegal, to find a fabricated signature with the wrong middle name sitting in a court file. Because that told a story too, just not the one she'd been selling. I waited 3 days before calling my mother. I needed to be calm. I needed her to think I was confused and scared, because whatever she said when she believed she had the upper hand would tell me exactly how far she was willing to take this. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm, sweet, motherly, like she hadn't just tried to steal my house with a fabricated signature. She asked how I was doing. She asked if I'd been sleeping okay. I told her I got the eviction papers. Then I stopped talking and waited. She didn't hesitate. She said it was time for us to have an honest conversation about the house. She said my grandmother had always intended for the property to stay with the family, meaning her and my father. She said I had been living there long enough without contributing. She said they were thinking about downsizing, and they needed the house now. Every word out of her mouth was rehearsed. I could hear it. She'd practiced this speech the way she practiced that signature, carefully, slowly, making sure every piece sounded reasonable. I let her finish. Then I asked one question. When exactly did I sign the lease? She said I signed it when I moved in. I told her I had never signed a lease. She said I must have forgotten. I said the signature on the lease spells my middle name wrong. 5 seconds of silence, maybe 6. Then she said I was being dramatic. She said this was a family matter and I was turning it into something ugly for no reason. She said if I had any respect for my parents, I would sit down with them and work this out quietly. That was when my father picked up the other line. His voice was different from hers, no warmth, no performance, just low and hard, like a door closing. He said they had given me every chance to handle this like an adult. He said if I wanted to bring lawyers into it, then fine, but I should think very carefully about what happens next. He said once people start asking questions, they don't just ask about houses, they ask about jobs, about reputations, about what kind of person drags their own parents to court. He wasn't threatening to hurt me. He was threatening to bury me socially, cut me off from the family, poison my reputation, make me look unstable. He wanted me to picture my life after I won, alone, with everyone I'd ever loved believing I was the problem. I recorded the entire call. One-party consent state. After I hung up, something unexpected happened. For about 10 minutes, I sat at my kitchen table and wondered if I had somehow missed something. If maybe my grandmother had changed her will at the last minute. If maybe there was a side agreement I didn't know about. If maybe I wasn't as protected as I thought. That doubt lasted exactly as long as it took me to open the safe again, pull out the deed, and read my name on it one more time. Claire Ann Danes. No E, no co-owners, no exceptions. The doubt was gone. What replaced it was something quieter and much more dangerous. My parents had looked me in the eye my entire life, and I had trusted them. Now I knew what that trust was worth, and I was going to make sure a judge knew it too. My mother didn't wait for me to make the next move. She made hers first. The morning after that phone call, my Aunt Linda called me. She was upset. She said my mother had called her the night before, crying, saying I was threatening to sue them over a misunderstanding about rent. She said my mother told her I'd become cruel and ungrateful and was trying to humiliate them in front of the whole family. Linda asked me to apologize before things got out of hand. She said my mother was devastated. I let her finish. Then I told her the truth. I told her I owned the house. I told her there was no lease. I told her the signature on the document my parents filed was fabricated, and they had spelled my middle name wrong doing it. Linda went quiet for a long time. Then she said 5 words that confirmed everything. "Patricia told us you were renting." That sentence hit like a brick. Not because it surprised me. Beth had already told me the same thing. But hearing it from Linda, who had always been fair, who had always tried to see both sides, made me realize how deep this went. My mother hadn't just lied. She had built infrastructure, a 6-year foundation of sympathy she could cash in whenever she needed it. 2 more relatives reached out that same week. Same script, same guilt. Neither of them had seen the deed or the fake lease. They were just repeating what my mother had fed them, word for word, without knowing any of it was true. Part of me wanted to call every one of them right then and blow the whole thing open, send photos of the deed, the copied signature, the misspelled name. But I didn't. Because everything my mother was doing right now, every call, every lie, every relative she pulled onto her side, was making her situation worse. She was building evidence against herself and didn't know it. Every person she told her version to was another person who would eventually learn the truth and realize she had lied to them too. So I let her keep going. I let her work the phones and play the victim. And I spent that week getting ready for court. The morning after Linda's call, I drove to the bank where my friend Laura worked. I needed the certified copy of my signature card, the one I signed when I opened the account 9 years ago. Laura pulled it from the file and slid it across the desk. I laid the fake lease next to it right there in the lobby. The difference was so obvious, I almost laughed. My real signature was small and sharp with tight letters that leaned forward. The one on the lease was wide, slow, and upright, like someone had copied a word they'd seen but never actually written. Laura looked at both signatures, then looked at me. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I made 3 copies of everything that afternoon. The deed, the lease, the bank signature card, and the county registry printout. 1 set went back in my safe. 1 went into a sealed envelope I left with Laura at the bank. The 3rd set went into a black binder that was going to court with me. That evening, I called a real estate attorney named David Porter. I'd worked with his firm on a few cases through my job, and I trusted his judgment. I told him what happened. He said, "Bring the binder." When I sat down in his office the next morning, David didn't rush. He laid every document out on his desk, side by side. The deed on the left, the lease in the middle, the 2 signatures on the right, the registry printout underneath. He studied them for what felt like a long time. He picked up the lease and held it closer. He set it back down. He looked at the signatures again. Then he took off his reading glasses and leaned back in his chair. "Claire," he said, "this isn't just an eviction dispute." He paused. "This is criminal fraud." At the hearing, we would present the deed and ask the judge to dismiss. That was straightforward. But we would also file a counter motion requesting a fraud investigation. Filing fabricated documents with a court is a felony. The judge would be required to refer the case to the prosecutor's office. I asked David directly, "Could my parents go to prison?" He said it was possible, but more likely they'd face probation, fines, and a permanent record. Either way, the prosecutor would be involved. Courts don't let faked documents slide. Then David asked if I was sure. He said, once the counter motion was filed, there was no pulling it back. My parents wouldn't just lose the eviction, they would face a criminal investigation, not family drama, real consequences that would follow them for the rest of their lives. I didn't hesitate. I told him to file everything. My parents had 6 years to tell the truth. They used every one of those years to lie. Whatever happened next, they had earned it. Dr. Helen Marsh's final report arrived by email 3 days before the hearing. She was the forensic document examiner I'd contacted 2 weeks earlier. Her preliminary assessment had already confirmed the signatures didn't match, but the full report went further. She found differences in pen pressure, letter formation, stroke sequence, and baseline consistency. Her conclusion was definitive. The signature on the lease was not written by the same person who signed the bank card. In her professional opinion, the lease signature showed signs of deliberate imitation. Someone had studied my handwriting and tried to copy it. David added the report to the binder. We now had the deed, the forged lease, the bank signature card, the county registry printout, and a forensic expert's sworn conclusion. Every piece of evidence pointed the same direction. My parents had manufactured a document, forged my name, and filed it with the court to take my house. The night before the hearing, my father called me. This time, his voice wasn't hard. It was careful. He said my mother wanted to settle this privately. He said if I agreed to drop the case, they would withdraw the eviction and never mention the house again. I almost laughed. They weren't offering peace. They were trying to make the evidence disappear before a judge could see it. If I agreed, there would be no court record, no fraud investigation, no consequences. Just a quiet retreat, and in 6 months my mother would start telling the family a new version of the story where she was the one who backed down out of love. I told my father no. I told him I would see them in the morning. He hung up without saying goodbye. That silence told me more than any of his threats had. For the first time, he was afraid. Good. The hearing was on a Tuesday. I arrived at the courthouse an hour early and sat on a bench outside the courtroom with the black binder on my lap. David sat next to me going through his notes. Neither of us talked much. My parents walked in 20 minutes before the hearing. They had an attorney with them, a man I didn't recognize in a gray suit carrying a thin folder. My mother passed me without looking at me. My father kept his eyes straight ahead. Their lawyer glanced at my binder, but his face didn't change. It would. The judge called our case. My parents' attorney went first. He told the court that his clients were the rightful owners of the property and that I had been living there as a tenant under a signed lease. He submitted the lease into evidence and asked the judge to uphold the eviction. David stood. He said one sentence. "Your Honor, my client is the sole recorded owner of this property and we have the deed to prove it." He handed the deed to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. The judge read it. Then he read it again. He looked over the top of his glasses at my parents' attorney and asked if he had been aware that the deed was in my name. The attorney opened his mouth, then closed it. He turned toward my parents. My mother was staring at the table. My father's hands were flat on the surface in front of him, pressing down like he was trying to hold himself in place. Their attorney said he had been informed by his clients that they were the owners and had relied on their representations when filing. The judge held up the forged lease in one hand. He held up the deed in the other. He asked my parents' attorney to explain how his clients could claim to be landlords on a property they had never owned. Nobody answered. David stood again. He submitted the county registry printout confirming no transfer had ever been filed. Then he placed the forged lease signature and my certified bank signature card side by side on the overhead projector. The judge leaned forward. He looked at the forged signature. Then he looked at the real one. He went back and forth between them 3 times. 30 seconds passed without a sound in that courtroom. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the judge looked at my mother and spoke directly to her. "Ma'am, did you or anyone acting on your behalf write your daughter's name on this lease?" My mother didn't answer. My father started to open his mouth, but their attorney put a hand on his arm and shook his head. David submitted Dr. Marsh's forensic report. He read the key finding out loud. The signatures showed significant differences in pen pressure, letter formation, and baseline consistency. In the expert's professional opinion, they were not produced by the same individual. The lease signature showed evidence of deliberate imitation. The judge took off his glasses and set them on the bench. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he had seen enough. He dismissed the eviction petition in its entirety. He said the filing was based on fraudulent documentation and had no legal standing. Then he said something that drained the color from my mother's face. He said he was referring the matter to the county prosecutor's office for investigation into the submission of forged documents to the court. He said the combination of the fabricated lease, the expert analysis, and the recorded deed raised serious questions of criminal conduct that fell outside the scope of this hearing. My parents' attorney stood up immediately. He told the judge he was withdrawing from representation effective that moment. He said he had not been aware of the true nature of the documents his clients had provided to him. He picked up his thin folder, walked past my parents without a word, and left the courtroom. The deputy who had served me the original eviction notice was sitting in the back row. The judge asked him to remain available as a potential witness in the fraud investigation. The deputy nodded once. My parents sat at that table with no attorney, no defense, and no one left to lie for them. My mother's hands were shaking. My father was staring at a spot on the wall like he'd forgotten where he was. 4 minutes. The whole thing took 4 minutes from the moment David presented the deed to the moment the judge referred the case to the prosecutor. 6 years of lies. 4 months of planning. 1 forged signature with 1 wrong letter, and it all collapsed in 4 minutes. The prosecutor's office opened a formal investigation within 2 weeks. An investigator contacted me for a recorded statement and collected the original lease from the court file. Dr. Marsh provided her full report directly to their office. My father was the first to break. He called me 11 days after the hearing. His voice sounded thin, like something had been pulled out of him. He said my mother had written the signature. He said she practiced it using an old birthday card I'd sent years ago. He said he went along with it because she convinced him the house should have been theirs all along. I asked him why he threatened me on the phone. He said he was scared. He said my mother told him that if they lost the house, they'd have nothing left. I told him they never had the house. It was never theirs to lose. 3 months later, the prosecutor offered a deal. They pled guilty, misdemeanor, 2 years probation, $5,000 fine, permanent court order barring them from filing any property claim involving me or my address, ever. The family found out the truth, but not from me. Linda made those calls. She contacted every relative who had ever heard my mother's version. The fake lease, the copied signature, the misspelled middle name, the 4-minute hearing, the prosecutor. My mother's 6-year performance collapsed in a single week. Some relatives called me to apologize. Some called my mother to ask how she could do that to her own child. A few stopped speaking to her entirely. My mother never apologized. Not once. The last thing she communicated to me, through her attorney during the plea, was that I had destroyed the family. As though she hadn't started the destruction with a practiced signature and a lie she'd been selling for half a decade. They spent 6 years telling everyone I owed them. The registry told a different story. My father sent me a letter about a month later. Short. He said he was sorry. He said he should have stopped it years ago. He said my mother had a way of making things sound right even when they weren't, and he chose to believe her instead of thinking for himself. I read it once and put it in a drawer. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. The house is still mine. The deed is still in my name. And now I know exactly what that safe under my desk is there to protect me from. If you stayed until the end, I'm glad you did. Some stories need a witness, and you were mine today. This is Betrayal Answered, and here, every betrayal gets one. Subscribe and come back. I'll be here with the next one.